apologies. I'm the head of software services at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. So if you're interested to found your own company, you can actually come to me and I will support you. Before we start, just to let you know, this actually these are my notes, okay? My physical, so we use my phone. We have a great group of panelists here. I think someone is missing, yeah? Actually, I wanted to name it all of you, but it's this later. Yes. So, the panel will be about the Decentralized Finance, DeFi, and you might have heard some of the panels before, but I'm going to still start with an introduction, a little bit about myself, but let's continue with Panelists from SMAPE Capital.
Hello, I'm Panelists. I'm Stereum Rocklogic.
Hi, my name is Brian Sig. I'm the infrastructure finance at Aptos Labs. Just wanted to thank Panelists in Austria for having us here.
I'm the founder and managing partner for Blockchain also Panelists here.
Thank you very much. Is it loud enough for everyone, or choose really louder? Okay, the mic will be reviewed. So, actually dive into our panel discussions. We're just actually this kind of development policy in Vienna that is actually attracting more and more national conferences here as well, in the area of Web3, blockchain, etc. So let's start with the first question, and whoever wants to respond to it, is matter. So, staking as a new base layer, that's actually the topic. So, if staking users are effectively the risk-free rate of crypto, what does it mean for a DeFi protocol to build on top? Are they competing with the base layer itself? Is it something you want to respond?
I have an opinion on that.
Yeah, okay. Very serious.
Well, I would question that staking users is not the risk-free interest rate that we should use. We have several alternatives, for example, like stable coins, which is important by year. However, I would agree that staking is kind of one yield option that can give you a yield option. So if you're a long-term holder of like ETH or Solana, and you just have it lying around, and why not stake? Because you're not yield in addition to price appreciation. Of course, it will take that into consideration. And before you move from a staking position into something more risky, then the price has to be right. And the DeFi protocol that has more risk, but a comparable yield, why should we do it?
Thank you very much. What about the other panels? Anything you want to conclude on this one? Yes?
Yes, so I agree. Staking is not risk-free. We've seen this maybe conflicting with some slashing incident on the period, or some other major security breach on other operators, and so on. So it's definitely not risk-free. But what users can definitely do is using tools if they don't want to run their own staking hardware or setup. Use free tools that use different node operators to sort of have a stable income. Because one of the node operators has an issue, then you still can rely on other node operators picking up the pace. So this is also something to keep in mind. Coming back actually to your question about if this is the base layer, it could be, because the underlying asset, for example Ethereum, is pretty mature, but I would argue that the users don't right now pick this up, because if you look to, for example, to Aave, and you look at the SAE rates that they pay, this is chokingly low. So you can lend SAE for as low as 0.04%. basically nothing.
Yeah, kind of echo the same sentiment as the other panelists, and then to kind of go back to one thing, I guess, in your discussion is sort of trust, right? So counterparty risk with, some of the other kind of staking provisions, but I'll leave that.
So I'll agree here, okay? Thank you for this. So for the audience, again, we will also have time to ask some questions after we finish this round here. So now let's move into restaking a bit. And also a bit of the theory also. Does restaking generally secure new infrastructure or just a risk on the previous tendencies? Yes,
it's like, if you think about it in TradFi terms, it would be CDO on CDO on CDO. And I'm old enough to know what happened in 2008.
Let's see that.
Needless to say, I would agree, I would agree. I don't believe restaking is without value, but it definitely has a risk component in it that you should not estimate. And if it becomes widespread, could become sustainable.
I would like to add to this that right now there is not really a possibility to restake properly. Almost all of the restaking happens with Ponzi tokens. So keep this in mind if you try to restake.
Yeah, it doesn't add on.
Then let's look a bit more into the infrastructure and power dynamic side. So, who's reshaping the infrastructure to pay? Protocols, validators, custodians, or the few middleware players providing APIs and tooling. What's your point on this?
Yeah, I mean, like in an ideal world, there's collaboration between all of these counterparties, kind of protocols, we define the right rules, you've got the right validators, pathway, and then custodians and other counterparties are acting in a proper manner. And again, that's going to be, I'd say, like protocol intended. Managers will might have a cross.
I would think about it as a fleet of different types of ship, right? You have one, usually very large one, a center, right, that defines the general direction, and then you have a smaller ship around that bigger ship that guard, secure, provide intelligence services around whatever the main direction that the ship is heading. So I'd say protocols lead, right? And the rest usually follows.
Anyone who sees it quite differently? So good here.
I think we are relatively early stages, which also have solid services again. So yes, it's on it, nobody really has any purpose. It's a flotilla of ships all moving in the same direction roughly. No dominant player or group of players.
Yeah, to this about ships, I think the ships are just getting big.
So if you want to elaborate on one or two questions a bit more detail, just continue, okay? Now about regulation and system risk. What do you think? Are staking providers becoming de facto financial institutions, and should they be regulated as such in one market? What's your statement? Pros and cons.
I feel like I'm taking all the questions. As my lawyers would say, depends. If you have a really basic staking service, like where you log in your leave and this is used for validation purposes, you could argue that this is actually just a payment service provider, security, credit, and Now, if you start issuing a liquid staking token based on this stake and do some crazy DeFi stuff, the argumentation that this is not a financial service becomes harder and harder. So I would say it really depends. I think the core functionalities, it might not need regulation because it's a technical service. Everything that goes above that, it will be regulated at some point.
I think I agree with this. I just want to add to this that the overall complexity right now of building such projects on chain with smart contracts is very, very high because everybody wants to add a little bit of fees. And this is very, very fast. It adds up to actually eating all the restating interests being basically gone and sucking into the fees.
And I agree with my panelists. If you look at like the White House Digital Asset Report, it does provide a bit of guidance on staking and then hoping to figure out like who's ultimately going to regulate it. The SEC chair shortly after the White House Digital Asset Report came out, spoke about the nature of staking and how it's very different depending on what's being done. From a high level, right, potentially not a security, but again, it depends, and there's still legislation that has to come out. So this is the guidance from U.S. regulators, but that again, still guidance, not really codified.
I'll go to the lawyer and she always tells me that if I don't have to say anything clever, I should just shut up.
I think line is either custodial or not custodial. If you're not custodial, at least in MiCA, you don't need a license. If you're custodial, you need to apply for MiCA license and be regulated. Which makes sense because if you are not custodial and everything is secured into smart contracts, you can't actually access the money. You can just raise some things. You can't do all the money and run away too quiet.
I think it's a good one line, but I think it's a multi-line question. That was available. Another line that regulatory bodies is in Europe laws whether or not can collect fees. So if an entity collects fees out of such a fee, entity is a financial service, but probably would be regulated.
It's a wider conversation, especially with DeFi. I mean, the custody part is very pertinent, and yes, when a custodial component is found, then a license is required. But with respect to DeFi, while the SEC has put out some guidance, again, it depends. When it comes to financial services, so everything that involves money usually involves a license. However, like you said, it can fall under this category as a service, which means it's essentially a fee for, loaning your money. So it's entirely an argument with regulators. Do they see it as a loan? Do they see this as a service? So essentially just helping out the network for the rules that are required. I think we're not going to see guidance in the next couple of years, and I think the industry will regulate itself.
But the policy is one concept wasn't completely clear yet.
Okay.
No, I just thought maybe you wanted to add something. So thanks for the explanation. For your talk. So let's take this just for a follow-up question. So let's imagine regulators force KYC AML at the staking layer. Does define as permissionless from rate?
I didn't understand the question.
So if regulators force KYC/AML at the staking layer, does DeFi as permissionless promise trading?
Not necessarily KYC doesn't mean that you have access or permission anymore. It just means that you need to be identified as an entity, like an organization, DAO, registered entity somewhere. So it opens the door to restrictions and permission-full protocols, but it doesn't necessarily need to be.
Yes.
Yeah, and then, kind of agree, right? And then it really, interested. I mean, it depends, right? If it's at the, I guess, the staking level, on ramps, off ramps, but could not necessarily be sort of competitive permission. So.
Let's move into next frontier, actually. Well, so what do you think? If staking becomes commoditized, where will the next source of yield come from? Or do we run into, let's say, diminishing returns? That's the point.
So it's already commoditized, I think, and the whole. So yes, it's a form of yield, but I would consider it to be somewhat true yield, right? Like not only because getting essentially a sort of fees that the validators earn from a Stereum network. The whole thing about efficiency and transaction volumes and gas fees, but I think eventually is already raised, right? Because there is no. So what's the differentiating factor for different protocols? Right? We don't have to attract volume, we have to attract institutional money and liquidity, right? It's the one who can offer the highest throughput, fastest execution, at the lowest cost will win the race. This is how markets usually work, right? So it's already
Yeah, and to some extent, right, there is, it's kind of looking at it at the layer one level. But we have proper management, right, of the foundations, you're doing the right things from a partnership standpoint, and then it does, hopefully find needs at some point, and that's, sort of been our philosophy at Aptos as well. Do the right things from a treasury management perspective. At the foundation level, you engage with the sort of right counterparties at the labs level, and then you let the product speak for itself. TBD on how long that sort of race stays, right? I think we're early in this to be prior point.
I think it's definitely commoditized because we already see that a lot of operators who operate with large stake of their parties get picked up and shares of these companies are basically traded as money.
Currently, yes, it is being commoditized, but it's not very expensive. Like there are a lot of different parts where the little fees are there and there, and so that's the second part where he is coming from. That you will see the players who can make it cheaper at the same service level. They will gain market share, and because they can offer their customers or their users volume.
In short term, yes. In long term, I don't know. I'm not sure about that because we see that operators who cut costs also cut costs, for example, in security, in high availability, and so on and so forth. And as mentioned earlier, we see every month a lot of staging incidents on the field, and probably this is not so much as a race to the bottom, but as a race to the bottom with the addition, who can hold it up as cheap as possible, as long as possible.
With an example of quality. That's an important part.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts on this. So, last question from us, and then we'll move into the audience questions. Imagine 5 years from now, is staking infrastructure dominated by decentralized networks or absorbed into banks, custodians, and ETFs? What do you think?
I think both. I think it really depends on the user. If you think like a DeFi power user, they will want to have like a fully decentralized version. They want the options to regularize together what they have. On the other hand, we had today it's about financial literacy. Like my grandma, she wants an integrated service from her bank. And it's like one of the big conditions. So I'm thinking both. And then it's a third group, if you think sophisticated institutional investors, they have different requirements in terms of security, compliance, and so forth. And we will have specialized offers. That's all I think.
I agree, but back to your example with the grandma will anyway use a bank, which will then again use someone or be also part of a more decentralized so
yeah, kind of echo the same sentiment on that hybrid thing. So yeah, as crypto protocols become more actively purchased through exchange traded products, ETFs, all the company treasury efforts, I think there's going to be a hybrid environment, right? Institutional, semi-institutional, retail, DeFi, will all kind of work together with one underneath.
Although being with DeFi, I would like to see 5 years from now that I can effectively trade some sort of, transparent or risk transparent product on chain and wouldn't have to go through an ETF. So this kind of sense I would appreciate if we would see not a hybrid model where DeFi gets sucked up by DeFi institutions and bows to rules that are currently existing, but kind of emancipates itself and produces its own products, right, that use different technology to trade it, that has similar security, auditable, kind of transparent standard as we do see in DeFi institutions today. So I hope we'll see that.
Very good conclusion. Thank you very much on your thoughts on this. So, question to the audience. Who has a question for panelists? I see. You want to use the microphone? Yeah, I'll bring it to you. I can bring it.
No, I can program.
Okay.
So, DeFi is the decentralized part of the new development within the financial industry. It's still used on a certain level by people who have knowledge, not only about crypto, but also what the DeFi means. And now I'm coming back to what we were talking about earlier, education. Well, you were just putting out the idea of what's going to happen in the next 5 years. How do you see that happening? There is no education. It's still only people who either come from TradFi or are in the crypto sector for a while now and understand what's happening. How do you see adoption of DeFi happening?
I'm going to kill that answer immediately. I'm going to say it. I think so. I think there's, with all the developments that we see in the world, I think people need to think about how to sensibly deploy or put their capital that they have to work. And for that matter, I don't really like to get the counter argument saying, yeah, people don't really have money to spend and whatnot. They usually they have, right? I mean, you can do this, not being posh, but you can start with as little as $10 for that matter, right? If you want to invest $10, I think you can make up your mind on how to do this. I'm sure you'll get scammed for two of them, right? If you jump right into the rabbit of DeFi. But it's a lesson learned. I know it's 20% of the investments. But I think, well, the way the world is going, I think people have to figure out how to sensibly put their capital to work, right? Which is kind of an intrinsic motivation to learn. There are tools that you can use to enforce that learning, which is clearly AI. Now we have to make sure that we have access to this, and things systems are not hallucinating or being manipulated, but that's a different story. And for the remainders, say for those people that maybe do not have access and do not have the time or whatever, I think we should put a lot more responsibilities on people that are actually managing the money for people or on behalf of people, that you not only say, well, I just brought it for you, this is right for you, just sign here, right? But, take a little bit of time explaining why, what it is, how this works, and why it's actually fitting to those people. I don't want to be solicited here, but we in our fund, we do have LPs that have had close to zero exposure to me as crypto as a whole, and we said that's not a problem for us. We'll take it on journey with us. We'll make sure we learn. So in the future, we'll be able to make informed decisions about how to tap that kind of asset class very responsibly. Does that make sense?
To me, it does, but investment is still a new concept, and I don't know if I am more than 10% of the population, and I'm generous saying 10% to understand that investment is good, even if it starts with $10. And I think conversations should start there, not the tools that are already out there for people to share what they know and understand.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing from some financial institutions are these mirrored products, right? Right, for example, say with their vision product, right? Say tokenized money market funds, BlackRock, these are just more digestible, similar to I think a lot of discussions with stablecoin payments being sort of a digestible form of DeFi. So if you're an entry level person looking to get into DeFi, maybe you don't want some sort of exotic restaking products. And it's getting in that more kind of easily digestible manner. But then you're right, part of it comes into bad actors, right? Over marketing a particular product that may not be acceptable. And then potentially that's where the regulation comes into play, but even right, it's not a regulated product, it's
I think both roads will slowly come closer together. We see already this week DAOs that adopt more of a conservative view of crypto and not so much idealistic. And we see that, for example, also BlackRock goes from Bitcoin is a scan token or a scan coin to only buy a couple of $100 billion of Bitcoin now. They will merge together, and ultimately I don't think people will learn more about finance. Some people are interested in it, saying I'm not interested in how blade works exactly. So it comes down to we will still need banks to educate or to sell products to people. Unfortunately, everybody or more people would be interested in money and investing in general, because it's good for building a fund. For retirement, for example, then not.
I think it's a general problem, it's not a good problem. If you can actually use it across who never heard anything about that. In crypto, I don't have to tell people about like usually people don't know what is stock or stock fund. I think it's a general problem in Austria or in Western Europe or in America is slightly better, but having said that, I think we have a tremendous advantage nowadays is that there is a lot of very solid, very good educational stuff that are out there, and it's open, it's free, doesn't need to go on YouTube, you need to go through all the bullshit, anything around to the board, and you have all the information if you really care about it. The second thing is my observations over the years. It takes time, but there are like pockets of change there. I mean, starting with regulated financial institutions, as much as release the final guidelines on what people working in the industry actually have to smarten up upon in order to give information to people. So that's a good start. And then there's a lot of initiatives. I mean, for example, we are part of the Austrian Blockchain Center is part in an Erasmus Plus project where, you know, really blockchain marginalized learners. We're starting an awareness initiative at the University of Economics because we couldn't assume it how little knowledge there is. I mean, I was in a lecture last semester, roughly like 30 people like that. And I asked, okay, whom of you have heard of Solana? One guy was this Ethereum, 3 guys, Bitcoin 10. And we that are students of economics, business. And, so there's a lot of work.
That's exactly where I wanted the conversation to go. And a question maybe for you, how about public-private partnerships with respect to financial literacy since the EU is pushing the financial literacy program?
Right, okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, for sure, personally, I'm open to this under financial consulting. Very good to see actually the development from local cities as well, also national ones coming here. It's still not part of a curriculum, let's say the education. I mean, everything related to entrepreneurship is getting better and broader. It's being implemented. There are different entrepreneurship education initiatives, but it's not something we focus, it's not very strongly on very quick about it. For sure, it makes sense to push this further, and I mean, the economic transformers, but also the very consumer. So they're open for this, but also just so you understand, it's a very big organization that which is actually covering a lot of different interests, which are sometimes, you know, the contrary to each other, you know. But we try to push it. There are also private initiatives, people working on this when it comes to financial literacy. For instance, I can tell you my wife, she is very much into this topic. She's running a course, she's publishing books, and focuses on crypto, etc. as well, on Web3, stuff like this, and there's much more than me. We're trying to push it, and also the education industry, which are trying to do, but it's still limited. So, open, you know, you produce suggestions that this work, whatever here, push this further, and thank you for the questions. But we need to close now the panel because of the time was already started later, so we need to finish earlier. I know. So thank you very much. Let's make a big applause for our panelists. Thank you.